Hey there, welcome back to Foot Traffic. So today I'm interviewing Jenna Kutcher. She has a brand new book out, How Are You Really? And selfishly, I feel like this was perfect timing for me to read this book. I think the book is amazing. We talked off air and she had talked about how there's like this hustle mentality and then there's this manifestation mentality. And really for her, she's kind of learned how to be in that middle, right? And I think for me, I have always been on like one extreme to the next of hustling versus just like resting because I'm burnt out, right? I have been in business now for almost 20 years. And if you've been questioning, is burnout normal? Have you ever been in burnout? Oh my goodness, absolutely yes. But you don't have to be. And I think with some of the strategies that Jenna shares and some tips and tools and just all of the things that you're going to hear her say, it just hits so hard because I know it's true. And I know that as I am really trying to, with every skill set, right? We're trying to just get better and better and stronger and stronger. And for me, this is really probably my biggest area of focus for the rest of 2022, absolutely into 2023, asking myself, like, how do I get to a place where I'm loving all aspects of my personal life and my professional life? And I think Jenna's going to give you a really good glimpse of when you ask yourself the question, how are you really? To have a positive response that comes from it, right? She's teaching you how to feel that feeling and to figure out where are you and what feels right and what doesn't feel right. And I'm really, really excited for you to hear this episode. So yeah, enjoy, go grab her book right now. As you're hearing this, it's probably still in pre-order. It comes out June 28th. So whether you go to Amazon or jennakutcher.com, go grab it. It is definitely a book. I'll tell you, I'm going to read it again for the sake of, I read it fast so I could interview her. I wanted to have all that knowledge before I interviewed her, but then I'm going to reread it knowing I want to slow down and I want to read the prompts and I want to journal and I want to walk through it. So it's one of those books you'll want to take your time with and journal out the questions she asks. So enjoy. Jenna, welcome to the show. I'm so stinking excited to have you here today.
I'm so grateful to be here. I feel like this has been in the making for a long time. And now this feels like a very special conversation that's about to be had.
I'm so excited. So your new book, How Are You Really? Now, when I heard you were coming out with a book, first of all, I said to my team, I'm like, go get her now. She's coming out with a book. We need to interview her. I want to hear. But part of me was like, what is she going to talk about? Like, there's so many ways you could have gone with this that I sat down. Actually, I just read it last night. So I read it within 24 hours. I sat down and I really was thinking like, I wonder what directions she's going. So what made you decide this is the book? This is your first book. This is the topic. And this is the moment. Like, I'm sure you've been being pitched on books forever. So what does that look like for you?
Oh, I got goosebumps. I don't know why I got goosebumps when you were saying that. I think it's crazy to me that people are reading the book. So every time that somebody says that, it like makes me just like, like in a beautiful way. So I literally said for years, I would never do a book, like ever. Like I was so hell-bent that it would never be the right thing for me. But I think there was a deeper part inside of me that was like, maybe, just maybe, but it's like, sometimes we kind of deny ourselves of some of the things that we might really want deep down. Maybe it's not now, but maybe later. And to me, it was in this season of figuring out like my business, getting things settled, the foundation. How do we make money? How do we make money while we're resting? What does this look like? And so to me, a book never made sense because it's like, this is a 2-year project. You don't make a ton of money. Right. Yeah. And then you go and have to launch it and release it to the world. And like, I was thinking traditional, like book tour and all these things. And I'm like, this is the antithesis of like me and like what I would want to do. And so for a long time, I was just like, never. And I often think about like, and I'm sure you've experienced this, Stace, where it's like, there's a season where money is like the most important thing in that, like you're working to earn it. You're trading your time to get it, time for dollars. You're totally game for that. And then there's this tipping point, and for a lot of people, it looks totally different, where all of a sudden time is your currency. Like time is the most important thing. Yeah. And the reason why the book suddenly was like, oh, I can do this was because money wasn't the reason anymore. It wasn't behind it. And I was so dead set on doing it not for money that I actually wrote the book without telling a soul, without any contract, without a book deal, without an agent. Nobody knew. Because to me, when I finally had that yearning and like that inkling of like, this needs to happen, I wanted it to mean something to me, even if nobody ever read it, even if it never got a 5-star review, even if it was never, on the bookshelves at Target. And I think I had to prove to myself, like, I've said I'm never going to do this. So if I'm going to do it, like, I just want to do it for me. And it was actually so refreshing in the digital world that we're in, where it's like, we have an idea, we create it, we publish it, we get feedback, to like sit on something and like to do it in silence. It was a really, really beautiful thing. And so I actually wrote the entire manuscript by myself from like September to December. So over a 4-month period.
Where were you at, like season wise, like babies?
Yeah. So this is the crazy thing. So it was on my 10th anniversary, wedding anniversary, and COVID was still happening and things were slightly creeping open a little bit. And we lived in a town of 1,200 people during COVID, in the northernmost part of Minnesota, very close to Canada. And there's this tiny, cute little quaint massage therapy place next to the pizza shop. I'd never been there. And I was like, oh, it's our 10-year anniversary. Maybe we should like do something. So I booked Drew and myself massages. And since we had a kid and no help, we had to I went to my massage, drove home. He got in the car, he went. It was like not the most beautiful dance. And the massage therapist, her name was Thea. And before she did my massage, I'd never met her before. She goes, I'm an intuitive healer and I'll be doing your massage today. And she just kind of left it at that. I like stripped down, lay on the table. But the whole time I was like, can she read my mind? What is she thinking? Does she know the towel is too hot? Like my brain was just like going crazy. And at the end of my massage, she goes, can I tell you what came up today? And I was like, I'm open-minded. Sure. Tell me. And she's like, there's something you need to do and you've been avoiding it, and you've been avoiding it for a really long time. And I think you know what it is. And I feel like that sentence right there could go for any of your listeners. There's something you've been needing to do and you've been avoiding it for a long time, and you know what it is. And the second she said that, I was like, frick, it's a book. And I went home that day and I had like the massage table lines on my face, and Drew was like, how was your massage? And I was like, I have to write a book. He was like, I'm so confused. I was like, go to your massage. We'll talk about it later. But really we were in a season of wanting to have our second child. And I had a history of pregnancy loss and just like a really long road for that. And so I wanted to know from her, am I going to be able to have a baby if you have these intuitive things? And she was like, you need to do this before the baby. This needs to come before the baby. And my whole writing process was either before trying to get pregnant, getting pregnant, and then birthing my child and turning in my final manuscript right around the same time. So it was a really beautiful but crazy time for me.
Oh, so interesting. I was trying to like piece it together when I was reading it, because you could tell your second wasn't here yet, but you knew she was coming. So that was really cool. So you brought up in the book this phrase about, how does this feel versus how does this make me feel?
Yes.
And it's really subtle. And I don't think a lot of people will catch that. Can you describe like the difference between those two?
Yeah. When I think about like feeling something, I really think about like being present in your body, like really like experiencing like your own heartbeat, like your own true like emotive response to something. And in a culture that we're so quick to like blame things or to point fingers or to say like, this thing is making me feel this way. It's this process of like taking ownership of the feeling and then feeling it. And nothing teaches you this better than being a parent to a toddler who has a lot of big feelings. Right before my interviews today, Coco was like, Mommy, please come up to my room and let's sit down and talk about my feelings. And it's a part of our family structure of like just trying to raise an emotionally intelligent child. But the art of it is that a lot of times when we are feeling out of alignment, or we're feeling inauthentic, or we're feeling like this pull that like just something isn't right. I mean, how many times have you talked to someone who is, breaking up a relationship or leaving a job, and you're like, how long did you know? And they knew forever.
Right, always.
But we've tuned that out so much. And so feeling like your actual feelings, like actually being in them instead of blaming something on them as like the response of it, really changes things. And it's really just this call to arms to like come back home to yourself and to check in with yourself, and to not just rush through feelings to get back to good, fine, happy, but to just be there. And I really love that differentiation, because I think it's really easy for us to point fingers.
Especially coming out of a pandemic and everything else that's going on. And now it's inflation. And now there's always something.
There's always something.
Yeah, just really having that ownership and that accountability, I think will take people so far. You had like so many good quotes. I just kept writing down quotes. Like there's so much good stuff coming out of this. So you brought up in there this ping, right? This little voice kind of urging you. And where I want to go with this is sometimes I think as entrepreneurs, we get the ping way too much and we act on them
Yes.
too much. So can we go like the
Yes.
opposite way of like you were talking to people that don't take you up on the ping? My people do
Yes.
it too much. So let's talk about that.
Yes. Ooh, this is good, Stacey. I love this. So what she's referencing is I was writing this chapter about like kind of like in life when your check engine light comes on and you ignore it and you ignore it. You can only ignore it for so long until like your whole engine explodes and it's going to be way more expensive and messy and hard. And oftentimes I think about our lives as like these messages where it's like, when you're on your phone or you land on a plane and you're like turning the Wi-Fi back on, it's like message did not send and you keep hitting the button. Sometimes I feel like the universe or God or whatever you believe in is like sending us these messages, these pings, and we're prone to just keep our do not disturb on and keep on going on with our life. But you bring up a very good point because a lot of my audience is the same way. We're multi-passionate. We love shiny and we love the chase. So many of us love like the building process than like the finished project, right? Like we just love like starting, but we don't always love finishing. And so what I think is really interesting is that a lot of times we don't know ourselves well enough to differentiate, like, is this meant for me or does it just look really cool? And we live in this world where everything is so beautiful and curated. And we trick ourselves into believing that because the home designer has this perfect house and the fashion influencer wears these perfect clothes and the mommy blogger has this perfect family, that like we need to do all of these. And we forget that they're good at one thing. And we're consuming their one thing, but our brain is tricking us into believing it's all the things. I was just thinking about this the other day because I was thinking about the pressures on all of us. And there was this meme and it was like, if you weren't scrolling Instagram or on Pinterest seeing these beautiful white kitchens, wouldn't your like oak kitchen feel really good? Like, couldn't it still feel good?
Right. Yeah.
And to me, when we're multi-passionate, it's so easy to get that shiny object syndrome. And I'm sure for you, because it's true for me, there have been so many times where I've gotten these invitations or opportunities or ideas and I've pursued them because they felt shiny or they felt like they'd be really meaningful, but they ended up being dull because they weren't for me and they didn't come from me. And when it comes to ideas, a lot of times people have ideas about what we should be doing or they're presenting these things, but we're not checking in with ourselves of like, does this feel good? Does the pursuit feel like something that would be valuable? And the other part of that, because your audience is so entrepreneurial and so excited about that, is thinking about how we can explore and experiment things without feeling like it has to be a success or failure. Like in the book, it follows my wild like career journey of, working in the 9 to 5, becoming a photographer, starting a watercolor print shop, doing mentoring sessions, becoming a coach, all these things, becoming an author. Every single one of those things started as a side hustle with no stakes. So no financial stakes, let's just try this and see if I like it before we start to monetize. And I think that side hustle mentality needs to be adopted again because we feel less than if we're not all in. But if you get these ideas or these pings, try it out for fun. Try it out with nobody watching. Try it out and just experiment and look at it not as a success or a failure, but just something that yields you a result that guides you forward.
Yeah. So good. Well, and I'm a big fan of masterminds and just like networking.
Yes.
But we can hear so many good ideas in 2 days from 12 different people. And then you go home, right? And you're like, what do I do? And you have to really go, those were all great ideas, but what do I want to do? What do I want to take away? And that is a skill set you have to practice. Like that's not something that came natural to me, at least.
Oh, I have a tip on this for people because I literally just am coming off of a mastermind that was like insane. It was 4 days and it was crazy. I'm like, oh, my brain. So a lot of times when we're learning, whether it's listening to a podcast like this or taking an online course or attending something like a mastermind or a meetup with other people, we're the people that sit down with notebooks and take like tedious notes, right? And I've realized that a lot of times in my life, I never go back to those notebooks because I go home and life picks up again and things happen and the schedule's full. And I've just been out of the office. So now I've got to catch up. So what I've started to do is I'll have a separate piece of paper or a separate journal or something. And at the end of the night, before I go to bed, I'll write down either 1 or 3 things that I still remember that are top of mind that I don't need to visit notes for to understand. Because a lot of times it's like, if you sift through all of the ideas and content content and URLs and platforms and things we could be doing, there are maybe 1 to 3 things each day that feel right for you and that like feel like you could take action on.
Yeah.
And so to me, it takes a list of 100 and it brings it down to under 10. And that always works really well for me. Cause I'm like, if I'm still thinking about it like 5, 6, 8 hours later, it's probably something that's meant for me.
Yeah, I love that. And I think too, not looking back over and just assessing kind of how you're talking about, like, how do I feel about this? You will remember that thing that sparked something.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, love it. Okay. Now I don't know you well behind the scenes. So I'm very curious, like the book is all about not hustling and like being still and all of that. Were you though a hustler at some point? I mean, you definitely bring up that you have and you burnt out and all the things, but like, where was the real pivot? Was it when you decided to have kids? Like, where did you go? This is no longer going to be my phase.
Yeah. I struggle so much because I feel like right now, especially for women entrepreneurs, there are 2 camps and it's polarizing, just like everything else on planet Earth these days. Yeah. There are the hustlers, like the hustle culture. And then there are the manifestors, the, dream it and it'll come. And I feel like women feel like they have to be in one camp or the other. And I remember when I did get my book deal and started writing, I asked my editor, like, why me? Why this book? And she said, it's such a polarizing place for women, especially driven and ambitious women, but you are where the woo meets the work. You hold the visions, you cast the visions, but you're also willing to work towards them, but at a pace that's sustainable and that doesn't take over your life. But I wasn't always that way. Okay. And I think for me, when I first took the gamble on entrepreneurship, I felt like I had to prove something to someone, whether it was my parents or my peers or the people I left behind in the corporate job. And it was the first time in my life that I'd really bet on myself. Like I believe in myself enough to leave behind a salary and a 401k and a 5-year plan to do this. So I'm not going to be wrong. In fact, I'm going to be really right. And I'm going to make sure I'm really right. I think we've all felt that way. And my lack of boundaries didn't, keep things and opportunities in. My lack of boundaries kept me from living my life. Like I look at boundaries as a way to like keep me in my life, meaning not just my work life, but like my life outside of it. And I referenced earlier, but like I went through 2 miscarriages and it was back when I was a wedding photographer in Wisconsin. And I was shooting. So, our wedding season is like May to October, if you're lucky. And I was shooting like 30 weddings in that season. I was missing, 4th of July with my family, missing my friends' weddings, like missing all these moments. And I was also planning my family around my work. So basically I looked at it as though I have a 2-month window to get pregnant. Then by the time my first trimester is done, I'll be able to shoot. I won't be too pregnant. I can finish the season and then have a baby. And, and I was like, whoa. Like I have built a business where I'm literally delaying like my life's dreams for the business. And it hit me like a ton of bricks when we went through and experienced our second loss and I had missed miscarriages. And so my body still believed it was pregnant and I had to show up and shoot a wedding the next day. And I realized like, while I had built an impressive career and I loved my career and I still love being a photographer, I realized that like, if I don't show up, I don't get paid. And that if I stop, my business stops. And there is nothing more disheartening when you've built something really great, but it doesn't allow you to be a human. Right. And so I think for me, that was the biggest wake up call where I had to show up and I was like, I will never do this again, where I build something that literally doesn't allow for me to say I'm having a human moment or a human month or a human year. And that was a really big shift for me in really creating and figuring out ways to serve people, to build a business, to make money while I rest, but also to build something bigger than just myself. Cause I think that's how a lot of us start.
Yeah. So when were you shooting up to? That feels like way too recent.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I was shooting, when I was pregnant with Coco. So 3 years ago, I was 20 weeks pregnant when I did my last wedding ever.
I just can't even believe that would be worth your time.
It wasn't, but I was scared because I told you, Stacey, I always do everything as a side hustle. Wow. And so I was like, this is my bread and butter. So at the end of my career, so basically I went from 30 weddings and I decided I'm going to phase out. So then I went down to 16, then 16. And then my last year I did like 8 and that was it. And so I
Okay.
phased out because I was like, just in case this new idea
Yeah.
doesn't pan out,
That's
I
so
can
funny that
pay
you
my mortgage.
like you were still at a level. I'm thinking you publicly even shared in your podcast you were at 7 figures 3 years ago. So
Yeah.
the fact that you were there and you're still like, I got to keep this just in case
Yeah. You know
blows my
what?
mind.
I have always felt like an NFL player that like, like
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
you're like, you could
Uh-huh.
be taken out at any time. Like your
Yep.
game could be finished and you could be done. And I've always just been so like, I'm very like, when it comes to risks, I'm like calculated.
Yeah.
I'll go
Yeah.
calculated. And so, yeah. So I shot my last wedding when I was 20 weeks pregnant with my daughter. So it took
That's
me
crazy.
3 years to ease out of that
Okay.
career. But I also think too, and I talk about this in the book, there's this idea of identity foreclosure where it's like,
Mhm.
I was the best wedding photographer in Wisconsin for 4 years straight. Like that was my shtick. That was my thing. That was my identity.
True.
And to pivot out of that felt
Yeah.
so scary to me because it was like, who am I now? And how do I
Yeah.
describe myself? And like that whole thing. And I think a lot of times women, we hold on to our high school jeans a little too long. We hold on
Yeah.
to things that no longer fit us and serve us, including identities. And I
That makes
am prone to
sense.
do that too.
Right. So you had the money wasn't what you were after, but it could have even been just like that title, that status, like to be the top photographer in your state. Yes,
Yeah,
I could see why you were like, but if I don't do that, I can't be the, because we
exactly.
just get that in our heads. Okay. That makes so
Absolutely.
much more sense. And I also think too, like coming from the Midwest, like we
Yep.
are very conservative. We've watched our parents be very good with money, right? So we're
Yes.
like the no dad, pay down your house. Like I think that probably came out of you too, I would assume.
Oh, 100%. I mean, my goal was to be entirely debt free by the age of 30, and we
Yeah.
were. And I remember going in to pay off our mortgage, like to pay it off entirely. And Vicky at US Bank was like, come again? Like, what do you want to do? I actually don't know how to do this. And it was because I was so aware of like my parents' financial state growing up and the fact that they had loans and like we were stretched. And so there was just something in me that was like, I never want to owe anyone anything.
Mhm.
And I will save every penny to make that a possibility. And so we have lived off of cash and like debt free for ever since, because to me, true freedom for me looks like financial freedom in that, like, I no longer work because I have to, I work because I want to. And that includes writing a book, which was crazy.
Yeah. Well, and you shared too how um you went on like a girls trip
Yeah.
and you really didn't have like those ambitions that they had specifically.
Yes.
So, is that when things really changed for you? Like was that like a pivotal moment?
Yeah. So when I was pregnant for the third time with my daughter, who's now 3.5, I went on a girls trip. I was super pregnant. Like I was like at the stage of like, I remember walking around in like a sports bra and like Drew shorts because it was like nothing fits. And we were doing this thing where it was like, next time you see me, I'll have, spoken on a stage, done $1 million launch, do all these things. And I remember sitting there like propped up, hands on my belly, and like, next time you see me, like, I'll be happy and I'll finally be a mom. And like, this is something I've waited my whole life for. And the year that I had my daughter, I literally said no to everything. Like I blacked out my entire calendar. There was not a single obligation on it because I just didn't know what it would feel like. And I
Yeah.
wanted to give myself space. I didn't want to be like, okay, 12 weeks from now, I'm going to be back to normal.
Yeah.
It's like, who knows? And it was such a beautiful year because even in that year, my business expanded and grew unknowingly because I had the space and the capacity and the white space for that. So I think that, I've always been ambitious. And when I do things, I want to do them big and I want to do them well. But I also know my limits and I also know my bandwidth. And I also am really good at like balancing like the hard and then the rest and like making sure I'm not in one state for too long. And so I remember that trip because I was just like, oh, I love you guys, but like we don't think the same way right now,
Right
but I'll
now.
be back in a
Yeah.
few years. And
When
that's
do you
exactly
feel
what's
like
happened.
you got back? Like when do you feel, or maybe you've still been
Right.
in that
Yeah. I was
stage?
going to say right before I got pregnant again. No,
Okay.
it's kind of crazy because when you look at like women entrepreneurs and like I'm the breadwinner, my husband's a stay-at-home dad. I'm so fortunate in that way. Like I have been pregnant 4 times in a span of like 6 or 7 years. And
Yeah.
then I've been pregnant 2 years, nursing for 2 to 3 years. It's like your whole life is totally flipped.
Yeah.
But I'm ambitious in a different way in that like I love doing things. I love going hard, but I love being home even more. And I love
Yeah.
figuring out ways to do the things well and right, but do them in my own way. So for example, when I recorded my audiobook for my book, they were like, okay, you're going to have to travel. It's going to be like 4 days of recording. So a day in and out, you'll be gone for 6 days. And I was like, I have a tiny baby. I'm just not willing to do that. And I was like, I'm not going to say no. I'll come to you with a solution, but like, no, let me figure this out. So I called Mary, who is my next door neighbor, good old Mary, call it Mary. And she runs the local radio station. And I was like, hey, Mary, at your studio, do you guys have like a sound booth or like something where I can like figure out a way to record this book? And she's like, yeah, we'll figure it out. So when I did my audiobook, I did it in Duluth, Minnesota. My cousin, who's like 51, divorced, has a kid, like not at all my ideal client, was my sound technician. And we zoomed in the person from HarperCollins and I knocked it out in 2 days. And I was able to be with my kids in the morning and at night. And like, it was just a beautiful reminder of like, okay, you don't have to do things the way that it's been done, but like get creative and fulfill your obligation, but do it in a way that feels good. Because I'm like, you'll hear it in my voice. Like I'm happy to be at home.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's been interesting
because you got to go home.
Yes.
It makes a difference. Yeah. I love that. I think sometimes this just happened to me where my daughter came home and she's like, we have a field trip at the zoo. It's all day and you need to come. I'm like, like it was in 2 weeks. Like clearly my schedule is booked. And then she kind of guilt trips me like, but mom, you're the boss. Like, can't you just cancel that? And I was nervous of even canceling on people with a 2-week notice, but I realized like, this is what we're preaching. Like you should be able to do this kind of stuff. So I made all those uncomfortable calls and everybody gladly rescheduled.
I was going to say people respect it.
They do. They were like, absolutely. Like she's got children too. Like no worries. Like their assistants are changing stuff around. So I think we think we could never say no because it would be an inconvenience.
Yes.
But I think a lot of people are willing and they're like, yeah, no problem. Like not a big deal. It was just a random Tuesday. Like we'll do it 2 Tuesdays from now. So
I found too, like when I had Coco and I would get like speaking inquiries or things like that, I like had to make, cause I know myself, I'm a yes girl. Like I love to make people happy. Like I don't want to disappoint anyone. And I literally had to like make a template for myself and my team. So I told my team, don't even show me any opportunities. I don't care how.
You'll just be
Oprah calls, maybe let me know. But beyond that, like, no. And I like created a template and it said basically, and I feel like it was such a permission granter for people when they received it, because it would say, you know, thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm politely declining, not as a reflection of you or what you're asking me to do, but only of a reflection of my core values and living them out. In this season, I say that like family and my life at home is most important. And so if I say yes to you, I'm saying no to that. And I hope that this invites you to live within alignment of what you say your values are. And it would just say, I'm cheering you on. I'm watching, like, you know, great job. Love, Jenna. And like, I got so many people who were like, oh, wait, you can do this. And it feels good. And it doesn't feel like you're like shooting someone down. And it's like, that is such a beautiful thing where we've never felt like we were able to do that. And when you do that and you're reminded, it's like the universe is like, hey, reminder, Stacey and Jenna, you built this so you have this flexibility. It's like, oh yeah, I forgot.
Like we forget what we did on purpose and they're like, oh, I can't do that.
Yes.
This. So just so good. Kind of in the same, you know, same alignment with this too, is you talked about like, it is okay to slow down. Like for me, I feel like I have my hustle moments and then I have my maybe burnout, but at the same time I can sense the burnout. So I purposely will slow down, but it's still very hard to feel it and see it. And I bring it up because I had a client recently say to me, can you explain burnout? Because I don't know if I'm in it. And it's so funny that there are people that don't know if they're in it or not. So how do you know when you're about to burn out or you're in burnout?
I know when I look at my calendar and I dread it, that I'm done. Like if I like look at my calendar and I'm like, who did this? Me? I'm like, oh, too far. And the problem that happens is that a lot of people feel the burnout coming or they find the burnout coming. And it's when they're still in the thick of the calendar. Right. So it's like, they can't just press pause and reset. But I would say too, like I've had so many different burnout moments. And it's like when the thing that once lit you up now feels like work, or you only do it to get paid, that's a good sign that you're probably not in a good spot. And for me, it was like, I used to bring my camera everywhere. I'd bring it, you know, to the park and la, la, la. And then like all of a sudden when I was like, oh, this is work. I don't want to work. I'm not bringing it. That to me was like, oh, your passion is in trouble. And like, you've got to protect it if you want to keep doing it. And so for me, like, I honestly I haven't been in a place of burnout, truthfully, even with this book launch,
Okay. I was
because
actually going
of
to
the
ask about
way,
that because
yeah.
this is
Can we talk
intense
about it?
usually. Yeah,
Yeah.
please.
Okay. So for anyone who's ever launched a book, the release, it's basically two phases. It's a creative of writing it.
Yeah.
And then it's the business of launching it. It's
Yeah.
two very separate
Which
things.
I think I've had books, nothing
Yeah.
at the level of you with PR, but
Yeah.
I believe the marketing it is 10 times harder than the writing of it.
Oh, I could write in my little cabin all
Yeah.
day. But here's the thing. So when I decided to finally write a book, I said, I will do this with absolute integrity to who I am and how I live. And I will do every step of it that way. And if I ever get out of alignment with the messages in those pages, I'm not doing it right. And I don't know about you, but like I've met a lot of people who write these wonderful books, but behind the scenes, like they're the one that needs to read it 18 times.
Oh, yeah,
like,
sure.
And a lot of times it's natural. It's like we teach what we need to hear, but
Yeah.
this isn't that book for me. Like this is really like the way I'm living my life. And so what I ended up doing is I decided like I am going to, so the entire month of the book launch. So my book comes out at the end of June. I have not a single thing on my calendar for the entire month of June.
Wow.
Not one thing.
So you pre-recorded everything so you would be done for the month
Yeah.
of June. Wow.
My daughter gets out of school.
Yeah.
It's summertime in Minnesota. We have waited a long time for summer. And I
Like,
want to
finally.
go into the book launch with so much excitement and vibrance. And I don't want to be tired. Like I want to celebrate and be awake to that. And so my team thought I was crazy. And a lot of my friends in this space thought I was crazy when I was booking podcasts 3 months out.
Yeah.
But at the same point too, I knew myself well enough to know that like, if I delay, it's going to be urgent, and urgency for me is stress, and stress is burnout. And I'm just not willing. And it was funny. I was with Jamie Kern-Lima the other day, and she had an amazing book. Believe it. It's so good. And she turns around, we're driving to a meeting, and she's like, how are you feeling about your book launch? And I was like, I feel so good. And she goes, you are the first person that has ever said that, one, and two, that makes me believe that. And I said, I feel so aligned. We're executing. We're doing it at a beautiful pace. I'm excited. I'm vibrant. I'm energetic. Like, and she was just like, oh my gosh. But I was like, I am staying in pure alignment, and I can feel it. Like I can just feel it. And so, yes, I know myself well enough to know the traps. And so now I'm just avoiding them at all costs.
Because I could picture somebody like you even saying, I don't want to book for what it's going to take out of me. Because it is so much time. And
I
energy.
negotiated my contract, and I was like, I will do 2 appearances total. Like, because I was just like, I'm not willing, but now I'm like, I'm excited. Like, hey fam, do you guys want to go to New York City? Like, I'm just like so excited now. And I think too, because I know that I'll have energy, that I'm like, let the whole gang come along and let's like go see like the Lady Liberty while we're there, you know?
I love that. Okay. We got to wrap up. This is so good. I could keep talking to you. I've got so many things that I wrote down that we are not going to get to, which just means they're going to have to go and grab the book. So this was big for me. You said the opposite of loneliness is not connection. It's being known, a connection of people that truly know you. My mind was blown.
Yeah.
I think we're trying so desperately to connect, but it's like fake connecting, and it's like the Instagram, the DMs. And how do you get there? How do we try to really find people that truly know us?
I often think about like, we've gone to a lot of different churches over the years. And if you're like in a church and you know, you could exit and no one would stop you or know that you left, that feeling. And I think we all walk around with that feeling all of the time. But I also think, especially as women, we're presented with a little bit different of an opportunity that the pandemic kind of level set for us, where it's like, we don't have to be career Stacy and mom Stacy and, you know, all these things. Like, we are a whole human being. And it's this notion of like screwing balance. Like, balance has been something we've been all trying to achieve. Balance, if you literally look up the definition, it's like maintaining a state of it. Balance is a moment. It's not like a thing that you can maintain. And integrating. And for me, I think a lot of times the internet tricks you into thinking like everyone has these circles of like 20 close friends and the bachelorette parties with the matching swimsuits and like all those things. But for me, like my circle is really close, but it's also really deep. And I've been feeling like I'm in the weeds of motherhood lately, like with a toddler and a young one. And like, I mean, I'm probably running off the least amount of sleep I've ever had, yet somehow I have the energy. And I feel like I've been sending texts like, please tell me it gets easier. Like I felt like I had it up until this point and I
Two is
really
very
don't have
different than
it.
one. Yeah.
It's so different. And I think about like how grateful I am to have friends like that. So what I mean by this is really the synopsis in the title of the book is the difference in the conversation of like, hey, Stace, how are you? Good, busy, fine, great. Moving on. And it's like when you lean in and you're like, hey, like, how are you really? And it's just like that intuitive healer who told me you have something you need to do and you need to be doing it. It's that single line. It's that single word that invites us to lean in. And one thing that I've been doing, and this can be a tip for your audience, if they're looking for that depth, like to not feel like they're in a room where nobody actually knows who they are, like they're not just lonely, but they're disconnected, is that I've been texting people when I think about them. Like you'll hear a song and you'll think about someone, or you'll see a shirt and you're like, oh, that reminds me of so-and-so. And I'll text them and I'll just say, hey, I'm thinking of you. No need to respond. If you want to, on a scale of 1 to 10, how are you doing today? And how can I support you? And I think that that question gives people space to say, I'm not okay, or I'm great. And you can respond accordingly, because oftentimes we're so prone to say like, oh, I bet you're feeling exhausted when really I'm excited, or, oh, you must be loving this stage when really you're feeling burnt out. And the way those thoughts and comments make us feel more isolated than ever. And so if we give people the invitation and the space to really share, that's where the depth comes in. And that's where we get that opportunity and that invitation to be fully known and fully accepted.
Well, and I think go first, when somebody's like, how are you? And you're like, oh, great. And things aren't great. Like it's just me sometimes saying to people, well, this is where I'm struggling, or this is what I'm not loving, or like our Facebook ads are doing this. And then that other person who would have been like, oh, I'm great too. Now they're like, oh my goodness, my Facebook
I'm so glad you said something.
Yeah, like, let's talk. Let's
my cost per conversion is so high. Right? What's going on?
Yes. So the second you like, just like be vulnerable first, I think you'll get more out of them. Whereas it's like, if you're just being surface level, you're attracting it.
Amen. Amen.
Oh, so good.
I love that.
Jenna, thank you so much for coming on. Where can they go find your book? I know it's on pre-order right now. So when is it launching? How do they get it? All the things.
Awesome. June 28th is the big day. You can go pre-order it. So it'll come to you super soon. If you go to howareyourreallybook.com, or if you just go to jennakutcher.com, it's the hub of all the things, the Gold Digger podcast, the book, everything else. And I am just so grateful, Stacey, for the work that you do and for the human that you are. And I'm just so grateful to be among other Midwest female entrepreneurs who are doing it on their own terms. So just thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So excited, guys. Go grab her book. You will read it. I read it very quickly. You will consume it. So definitely get that book in your hands. And I can't wait to hear what you have to say. Thanks, Jenna.
Thank you. That was amazing.